Welcome to Geocache Adventures with me, Shadow Dragon 1, where I explore the world of geocaching. If you enjoy the show, please consider leaving a review wherever you listen to podcasts or on the Geocache Adventures Facebook page. You can also follow Geo Adventures on Buy Me a Coffee for a behind-the-scenes look on every episode. That's one word, GEO Adventures. It's free to follow, or you can become a member and unlock exclusive posts and information. Your memberships go a long way for helping support the podcast and are greatly appreciated. Hi, everybody. Amy, Shadow Dragon 1 here, and with me today is fellow geocacher Steve Miller. Thank you so much for joining me today.
Glad I could be here.
So to start off, can you tell us what your caching name is and how you got started geocaching?
My idea is Trekkie79. Actually got started with a friend of mine at work, kept talking about it, and he found a cache, and it was just such a phenomenal thing. And so I got to doing some research and thought it sounded interesting. Then one day my wife brought me home a little Gecko GPS. It was a very simple one that I had to actually manually key in the coordinates into. And so we went out and tried to find some geocaches and just kind of got crazy and hooked in it, and now have found over 27,000 caches.
That's a lot. That's quite a few. How long have you been caching?
Since 2009.
Okay. It's pretty early on.
Yeah.
What was the density of caches like in 2009?
They were fairly prevalent, at least here in the Kansas City area and stuff. I mean, not near as dense as it is now, but it was still pretty good. I talked to a few of my other friends that were here from the very beginning where, yeah, he's like, I had my 100-mile radius cleared out. Of course, that was only 25 caches. And now 100 miles is probably 3,000 caches for me.
Yeah, quite a bit more now. Well, today we're going to talk about Wherigos. What is your background with Wherigo caches?
My very first Wherigo I found was one called 310 to Yuma, which unfortunately has since been archived. But it was kind of a neat one that you actually had to try to get into the cartridge and go like you were actually going to try to catch a train. You went to a train station and you had to go to different places, and it was more of a fantasy thing of getting into the actually, like I say, to find your or buy your own ticket and catch the train to Yuma. And so that to me was kind of a cool thing that was different than just a traditional go, lift up a lamppost skirt and find a cache or that. Then probably a year or so later, I found another one that again has been archived called Geocachetopia, that was written by a guy down in Wichita. And the really cool thing with it was he actually even supplied the source code so you could see what he did. And it was one you did as what they call a play anywhere, that I just went out by a ball field out here near my house and started walking around and was in this fantasy world of geocaching, finding imaginary gems and stuff like that. And then once I got done, it gave me the information where the final was going to be for when I finally ever got down to Wichita. So that got me started to the point that I had to research them a lot more.
Okay. So at this point, how many Wherigos have you created?
I've created 20 different Wherigo cartridges and found over 400 of other people's cartridges.
So you've got a bit of experience with Wherigos, and you've seen a bit of variety, I'm guessing.
I have quite the variation of it. The very first Wherigo cartridge I created was from you went around a mall that was in the process of dying, but you went around and pretended that you was going to talk to different people at stations around the mall, and basically it asked you questions and so forth. That I had to laugh. One of the people, or actually I think a couple of them, when they were playing it, lost track of the idea that it was a virtual world that you were doing that, and they actually tried to go into the mall and find the mall manager and talk to them and ask them questions about this
Oh, wow.
cartridge and that. But
That's funny.
unfortunately, since then, the mall has now been demolished, so that cartridge is gone. I have a few others out there. Another one that was a rather interesting one I built, that every player that plays it gets a different version of a game, because I use random numbers in there. And so two people could be playing it, walking along this path side by side, and each one of them have different things that come up and display to them and ask them
Wow.
different questions at times. So it really got you into what I thought, more immersed in, that you had to pay attention to the cartridge, and what I thought of as a fantasy game.
That's very interesting. So we may have already lost a few people if they don't know what a Wherigo
Yeah,
is. So can you
sorry.
explain to us what a Wherigo cache is
Okay.
and how it's different from a traditional cache?
A Wherigo is kind of two different aspects. You do have the traditional physical cache container out there somewhere, but on the cache page, you do not have the coordinates for where that traditional or the final is. Instead, you would have to download onto your phone, or some of the GPS devices did it. Most of them don't anymore. An actual cartridge that somebody has created this program on, and then you go through the interactive play that may ask questions, that may just kind of walk you down a path and things happen. And then once you have completed the cartridge, it will give you the coordinates of the final cache that you can go and physically sign your name on the log.
Okay. So the Wherigo icon that we see in the geocaching app, it's sort of like what you would say the mystery puzzle cache icon would be. It's not at the exact location of
Correct.
where the physical container is. Okay.
Yeah, I don't know. I think it came out after the mysteries, but yes, for all practical purposes, it is a mystery that also requires a special device of the Wherigo cartridge.
Okay. And because it has this cartridge, it can be like a whole different game, like you were talking about, a whole different virtual game, or I've seen them. The one I've done personally is similar to an adventure lab where it takes you to various points and you find an answer. And
Yeah, I mean, I've done some simple ones that basically, when you open the cartridge up, it would ask you a simple question, you'd answer it, and it gives you the answer. I've done some that when you start in there, it basically tells you or shows you that there's something down the road or so a ways, and you would follow a path or walk toward it. And when you get there, it'll show you some other things. Matter of fact, I have one other one up at one of these living history museums. And actually, what happens is you start and you walk down the trail, seeing these different older houses and stuff. You get to one of them, it'll ask you a question, and maybe you have to count how many windows are on the front of the house and answer that. And then it'll take you to the next stage where it'll ask you, what item are you looking at? And once you go through all these different questions, then it will then give you the answer of where the final would be.
okay. Let's talk a little bit about some of the enhanced features. And this is probably by no means an extensive, inclusive list, but one you mentioned already is the Play Anywhere. So, can you tell us a little bit more about that?
Okay. Where a traditional Wherigo cartridge, and most of them have location-based stuff that you would have to go somewhere to be. A Play Anywhere one, you literally, it depends on which type. There's even a couple of variations of those. The one that I had talked about originally there was I would just go out into an open field, start the cartridge up, and then it determines where my current location is and builds the imaginary world around me. The other type you actually have of a play anywhere is, which I have some other ones out there, that I just open the cartridge up and it just asked me a question. It had nothing to do with a location at all. It just asked a question. Like I did a series for the picnics that we have here in Kansas City, that you'd open up one of them and it'd ask, well, where was the very first Kansas City picnic held at? And you had to answer that question. You answer the question, it gives you the answer. And that one I never even had to leave, or the people never even have to leave their desk to do that.
Okay.
The one like the Geotopia and Puzzle 15, which is another Play Anywhere series, you would actually go out and find an open space and start it and then walk around the area, simulating locations, which is kind of hilarious. If you see somebody doing that, you might see a group of people just out in a open field, walking, looking at their phones, stopping, answer something, and then walk somewhere else, and just because it's all simulated on the phone.
Now, that type of simulation can also be done in a way where you have to go to a specific location to do it, correct?
Correct. Like the one I kind of mentioned about I've got, or another one I've got, that, well, that wouldn't be a Play Anywhere. That would just be a normal Wherigo that you would go, and then as you're walking around through, it will notice, okay, I have now reached what it calls a new zone, and something could happen. And you answer that questions or do whatever needs to be, and then walk again to another area and then answer the questions that would need to be at that.
Okay. I have seen some Wherigos with time restrictions on them. Can you tell us a bit about what that is and why somebody might want to do that?
A couple of different ones that I've done like that. The one I mentioned that was my very first one, the 310 to Yuma, was basically once you walked into the train station, you had to get to actually act like you were going to load onto the train within 10 minutes, going through multiple steps, because that way it was kind of like, oh, I got here to buy my ticket, then I had to get to the baggage spot, and then I had to get to actually load on the train within the 10-minute time window. Another one I've seen was designed for you to go down one of the rails to trails path, and it had a starting point and an ending point, and you had to make it between that in like 20 minutes or something like that. And if you was walking it, you had to walk it at a pretty good pace. I did it on a bicycle. I don't walk that fast. I've got another one that I work with it's actually a Play Anywhere one. There's called a Hangman series, that like you would play in the game Hangman.
Okay.
I'm sorry, that's a different question. It was the constellations one, but it made you answer questions within a time frame, and if you didn't answer enough, you failed and you'd have to start all over. So It was kind of a race type of that.
Okay, so there's different ways to apply the time restriction to make it more challenging, or okay.
Yeah, I mean, it's just something to add another dynamic as opposed to just, a simple walk out and grab a cache and be done.
What about audio and visual aspects?
I have not done too much with the audio side. I've seen some where they'll add some different dings or bells or stuff like that. When we used to do them on the actual GPS devices, they were very limited as to what kind of sounds that they would make. Through the phone, I assume you can add advanced ones and a lot more. I don't know with that. Visual, you can add in, pictures, different icons. This one that I talked about, the Geocachetopia, he actually had some sort of a video in there that it morphed a picture from one person to another person in there with that. I've not been able to do that as well. I'm not that sophisticated with my ones, but I usually do add pictures of, like the very first one, I actually drew pictures of different things in line arts that I, like stick figures that I used when you were going around the mall, or the other ones, the one for the picnics. We actually had some pictures from the different picnics that you would pull up and as you were going through it to help make it more visual and enhancing.
Okay. Some people I've seen online in different articles and Facebook and stuff kind of compare the Wherigos to Adventure Labs, and some people speculate Adventure Labs will eventually be replacing the Wherigos and this and that, but they're not exactly the same in what they allow to do. So can you tell us a bit more about some of the differences? Because it sounds like Wherigos allow for a lot more options for what you can do.
You can definitely make the Wherigos a lot more interactive, and to be honest, you can make them as long and as complicated as you want. I've seen some 25 stage ones and stuff like that. The difference of a Wherigo and an Adventure, one of the things is the Adventure Lab, you're getting credit for each stage or stop that you're at, where a Wherigo, like a multi or an unknown, you only get one credit for one find at the very end. I personally feel that the Wherigo cartridge, because the programmer can do much more interactive and make you interact with your phone in possibly a virtual environment, can get much more in depth and details. On the flip side, some people don't like it as well because of that same feature. I don't know sometimes when I'm showing up, is this going to be a 1 or 2 minute Wherigo cartridge, or is this going to be an all day long? There was one down in Springfield area that you actually had to drive to up near St. Louis and back to Springfield and something else. So it
That's a
was
bit of a
taking people,
drive.
4 to 6 hours or something like that to complete the one cartridge.
Wow. That's a lot.
Yeah, the one I have out here that's you have to walk around the park. I've actually had people taking an hour walking around this park 2 or 3 times until they have actually been able to find all the things that it required them to do to complete the cartridge. Typically don't like to make them that long, but sometimes it happens.
So the time can vary drastically on these.
Definitely. I mean, I've done lots of cartridges that were a matter of minutes, almost like a park and grab. I've done others that it's taken me probably up to about an hour, is about as much. We had one that there was 4 of us trying to do it, and after almost 2 hours, we quit.
Wow.
because we were having some trouble with it.
On the Adventure Lab page, it'll give you a time estimate. It calculates that. But on the Wherigo cartridges, it's up to the discretion of the creator to put that in, correct?
Correct. And I mean, a lot of them will say takes more than an hour or not, but part of that also can even vary on just how well I know the area or how well I can get around in it too, can add to it.
You've talked some about the cartridges.
Mm-hmm.
What programming language do you create these in?
It's created, the language that it uses is a Lua, Lua is the extension. The original builder from geocaching, you actually had to write actual Lua code and create the stuff with it. They have gotten a couple of other builders out there that are more interactive, point and click type things that actually build the source code in the background for you, and you really don't even have to know how to do the programming. Now, I am a programmer by nature, by trade, and therefore I love to go back and look at the actual source code and stuff, but you do not have to for the other developers that are out there now.
Okay. So for somebody like me that cannot code to save their life and gets overwhelmed looking at HTML coding, I could still use one of these developers to help me create something.
Correct. I've recently downloaded one called Wherigo, Urwigo. It's built over in Europe, so you got to watch some of the stuff. The help things that I've gotten into is more, I don't know if it's Polish or German, but it's something from over there. It does it with kind of a bit of a programming interface that you'll build if statements and stuff like that. There's another one, Wherigo, Earwigo, that is much more strictly a graphic interface and build it. I have not used it very much, so I'm not much of an expert, but I do know others that were not programmers at all that have built cartridges from it.
Do you know of any other software applications to create them with?
The one other one I saw listed was Wherigo /kit, put out by a guy in North Carolina.
Okay.
And then, of course, the old original builder from geocaching, but I have trouble. I cannot get it to run on my latest version of Windows.
Okay. That's good to keep in mind. The Wherigo and the Earwigo, are those for Windows?
They run under the Windows system, yes.
Okay.
They are both. Wherigo is you run it on your local machine. Wherigo is an online builder that you build it out on you have to be connected on the internet.
Okay.
And do it through your browser.
Do you have any tips for somebody creating a cartridge that you could share with us?
Well, the number one is, try to make it something fun. But the big thing is you have to kind of stop and think, what questions do I really need to ask, and how can I make sure that they're not ambiguous? Like the one I kind of mentioned about where I had them going around the mall asking for a mall manager. I didn't make it apparently as straightforward to make sure that this was just virtual, that it was going to pop up, that somebody actually got out of their car and walked into the mall and asked for the manager. So just making sure that you really think through what the questions are and that, rather than just guess, because it's a little easy when we're talking to kind of make sure I understand, but you got to make sure when you're putting it in these cartridges what you really are wanting the person to answer.
Is there a beta testing option for these cartridges?
Most of these tools have a way that you can actually do them interactive, and you can play with them on your computer, simulating that you're actually out there walking around the different places and going through the questions.
Okay.
I also highly recommend that once you have built a cartridge, that you actually get it with a friend and have them walk through it and see what questions they have, or that it works on different type machines. Because another issue you can run into is different devices sometimes don't play the cartridge the same, or have trouble with certain commands that are available in there. We used to have real problem early on with the GPSs crashing because they'd go into something that it wouldn't happen. So people have to go back and start their cartridge all over again.
And I'm guessing now with smartphones, because of differences between Apple and Android, you could run into the same difficulties.
Correct. And there's multiple players that play it on both platforms. I'm more familiar with Android ones, and there's like um, GOH Go will play them. There is a app specifically called Where You Go that is strictly for the Android.
And then the iPhone has its own specific app as well, which I can't think. I think it is called Where I Go.
I believe it is on the iPhone. And I thought one of the other regular caching platforms also played the Wherigos on the iPhone, but I am not for sure.
I'll have to look into that because those are the only three I know of.
Yeah.
So, are there still any GPSs that you know of, newer GPSs that can play the Where I Go cartridges?
Anything that has been sold, by my understanding, at least by Garmin, since I think it was 2018 or 19, quit handling the Wherigos. I have an older Oregon that I can still play it on that I carry with me, but I play them on the phone because that's really the easiest, and the graphics is so much better because the older Oregons were just black and white screens and fairly small screens, especially compared to today's phones.
One thing I see all the time from people about Where I Goes is difficulty loading the cartridges and getting them to work.
Yeah, I still encountered problems as I still play them, even after playing 418 of them out there. The biggest issue I have is, and I go to the geocache page and find the link for the Wherigo cartridge and download it. And for whatever reason, when I downloaded it, it went to a different place on my phone than where my Wherigo program expects it to be. That has been the biggest thing, is making sure you get all those synchronized. Once that is done, usually it's not much of an issue at all.
Okay, yeah, that's the issue I ran into as well. It seems to want to go to two different locations for some reason.
Yeah, I just changed everything and said, okay, you put it in my download folder, and that's where I will look for everything, rather than this folder for this app looking here and that app looking there. And generally speaking, they've been working right. But
okay. So typically once we get the file location extension searching figured out, it should load to allow you to play. Now, what happens from there may vary depending on everything. The ones that you have created, have you had a lot of people report glitches with them and crashes?
Especially my early on one, I would get every few weeks or whatever a log that somebody could not get it to play, couldn't get this or that. And so when I got ready to create my second one of the things that I did was I got a group of 3 or 4 other people together, each with different devices, and we kept testing them on those different devices. For the most part, they stayed fine. And since most of us switched to using the phone, the crashes and the glitches have gotten fewer and far between. But I won't guarantee that they're going to run without having that. One of the other things, if I'm playing a more involved cartridge, there is an option I can periodically save where I'm at, so that if it were to crash, I just have to go back to that point and start from there.
Oh, okay. So that's good to look for that save option then.
Yeah, especially if it's, like I say, it's a real involved, a lot of stages.
I know there is a thing called a reverse Where I Go.
Yeah.
Can you tell me about that?
There's a couple of different variations of those.
Okay.
The most common is where was one gentleman that created a cartridge that once I play it and complete it, I'm able to go out and create my own using that same cartridge with putting special codes in. That's the one that's proliferated all over the the world or so. And with it, what happens is when I go into it, there's not like, it doesn't tell me where I'm going or where I need to that. It just tells me I am so far away from the final point. Doesn't give me a direction. It just says I'm a mile away. And then I have to move, try again. On there's a button that says check my location or test where I'm at, and that'll tell me how far it is. And the idea is I keep going until I get close enough, each time kind of maybe triangulating myself in to the point where I find what the final location is.
Is there a limit to the number of times you can check that?
As far as I know, not officially. I will
Okay.
say I had at least one of the times I was playing it where I had checked it over 20 times, and all of a sudden it wasn't updating, and it kept telling me the same distance over and over. What I ended up doing was just exit out of the game, start it fresh again from where I was at, and then start it all over. But officially, I
Okay.
don't believe there's supposed to be a limit. But
So for that type, it's my understanding you would go typically to where the Where I Go icon is posted is typically a good starting point.
it can be. I've been known to just once I, load the cartridge or open up, start it and try it from wherever I may be 10 miles away. I may be there close with it. Most people do put the virtual location, the starting location of it, within a few miles and help get you going. But I've seen ones a lot farther than that and so forth. So, no, you can start it at any point.
Okay. What are the other reverse Wherigos you mentioned?
There are a few of them that were other people have actually built their own cartridge, and you have to play that specific one, not this generic reverse Wherigo that you actually start it by putting in a series of numbers that it uses to determine where you're going. I have never actually played any of the ones that are specific. I just have found them out there on the geocaching.com and realized they were there.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, the one that is most common when you bring it up, you actually have to enter in 3 different 6-digit numbers. And that's how it knows to determine where the final location is.
Oh, okay. So it's like the same source code and it's pulling files based on those codes you input into it.
Correct.
Okay. Okay. I get you now.
We talked about some other play anywheres, a couple of cool ones that I've seen where they have, again, one set of cartridges that load, but you can play them where people have created them for different states. There's a series called 15 Puzzle. It's kind of like the old hand game that you had the squares that you slid the numbers around, tried to get the numbers in order.
Okay.
But you do that with a Wherigo cartridge. Well, there is one generic cartridge out there that people have set up, and then they'll have them in their particular state that you would do. But they are a play anywhere cartridge. So I actually went out here at the park near me and I sat and played it for each and every state and then saved the finals so that when I ever get to that particular state, all of a sudden I have a Where I Go solved in Iowa or Montana or wherever it happens to be.
Okay.
There's also some different hangman series that you again play for the different states and stuff, and then can have the answers out there.
That's interesting. So it's kind of like solving a puzzle cache in a different state and figuring out later, only you're playing a cartridge of some kind.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So because the icon in the geocaching app, even though you need a separate app to play the cartridge, when you click the geocaching icon, it loads a cache page in the app still.
Yes. Okay.
So then are you able to edit the coordinates to input your final like you would, say, a puzzle cache?
Yeah. Um, I guess in actuality, there is two different websites out there. You got the geocaching website, which we're used to, and that's where all that is. And there's a Wherigo website. And actually, the people load the cartridges in, and they don't have to make an actual geocache. You could just put cartridges on the Wherigo website, though I don't know that anybody does that because we typically relate them to a geocache. So when you start on the geocaching, most people that create Wherigos, they also put a link on their geocaching cache page that takes you over to the Wherigo site that you load the cartridge, and then you would go ahead and play it. Then you can go back to your geocaching website and, yes, update the coordinates so that they would be now posted at the new final, or some of us just add an extra waypoint called a final.
Okay. So because it's this is very different than Adventure Labs, because Adventure Labs, they count towards your fine total, but they don't count towards like your fizzy grid or any of that because it's not calculated the same way, it's not logged the same way. Do Wherigos, since they have the cache page, do they count towards a daily streak in your DT grid?
Yes. Since you actually have a cache page, you have all of those difficulty, terrain ratings, and all that stuff there. And yes, those do count toward the different ones. Now, there are cache streaks out there that restrict the type of a cache, but as a general rule, yes, they are on all of your standard stats. Where in Adventure Lab, since there is not a difficulty, terrain rating, and actually we don't even have location associated with it, they do not count the same, because I can make stages of my Adventure Lab be anywhere I want in the world, regardless of where the original icon is.
I thought they had a limit on that now.
They may have implemented it. It wasn't originally, because there was some different ones where they were virtual ones out in the middle of the ocean.
Oh, geez.
But on the other ones, like I think the start of a Wherigo and the final have to now also have to be within a certain distance. But you can actually have stages in a Wherigo cartridge that could be hundreds of miles away, like the one down there in Springfield is.
Okay. I'm not sure why you would want to do that, but that's interesting that you can.
Yeah. This particular one was telling the story of some sort of bank robber or whatever that you were, and they actually followed where the people physically went. But
Oh, that is kind of neat, but that's
yeah,
really crazy how far in between that goes.
yeah.
Is there any instance that you're aware of where it takes multiple cartridges to complete a Wherigo, or is each Wherigo completely contained in its own cartridge?
As far as I've encountered, they are all within one cartridge.
Okay.
Now, I have even had one cartridge that could give me the answer for several of them. There's a GeoArt up in between Nebraska and Iowa that it's like 105 Wherigos, and you'd open up one cartridge and you'd play it 10 times for 10 different Wherigos in that art, and then you'd get another cartridge and you'd play it for 10 different ones. They were answering questions type thing.
Oh.
But generally speaking, it's a 1-to-1 ratio. I would say 99% of them are out there that 1-to-1.
Okay. Since the Wherigos are housed through a different website, even if the physical cache is no longer there and it's been archived, are we still able to access the Wherigo cartridges and play them?
Yes, you are. I went out and looked at that one Geocachetopia, and I think it is still out there. That's the one if somebody was interested in starting some ones is really cool because he went to a great lengths to put the source in there and put explanations of how he did a lot of the stuff, and was almost like a tutorial on how to do or Wherigos.
It sounds like it can be such a complex and such a simple thing all at the same time, depending on how you do it and what you do with it.
Yeah, it had such potential and is so awesome. And that's why the people that worked with the Wherigos wouldn't let it die, so to speak, because when Groundspeak kind of quit supporting it, it kind of started to fall out of favor. But then there was a community of cachers that have taken it on and made it their own and tried to keep it going enhanced because it has a tremendous amount of potential to do. And I really enjoy a lot of them. Don't get to play as many of them as I'd like, especially when we're traveling, because again, you don't know what you're going to get into, if it's going to be a few minute thing or if you're going to be there all day long. And sometimes you don't have that much time when you're traveling cross country.
Right. I personally, when I was trying to research for this, I could not find anything stating why Groundspeak sort of abandoned the Wherigos. Is there anything you ever heard about that?
I have not heard anything. It just, the best I understood from the forum stuff and people I've talked to is it was an idea they started with and then decided or just didn't keep following through. And then after a while, just decided to table it as an idea. But nothing was ever said one way or the other. And they've never officially leased it to whereas it becomes developed by somebody else. So that's why these other builders have actually had to build their own brand new platform. They couldn't even use geocachings as a basis.
Oh, so that's why there's a whole different host website for the cartridges.
No, the Wherigo
No?
cartridge site, that was originally by Groundspeak. But this
Oh,
Wherigo and Wherigo, those are all developed totally on their own off over in Europe for the most part.
okay. Interesting. Huh. I'm just kind of pondering that for a second. The whole taking all that in, that's like all types of geocaches, it seems like a mixed bag if people love them or avoid them.
Yeah. I know there's a lot of people that won't ever deal with the Wherigo just because it is a lot more complicated and stuff. But then I also knew people that never would do a puzzle cache. Like, I'm into geocaching, I go find the cache and that's it. I don't want to have to do any other thinking and stuff. And Wherigo is one of those that can be very, very fun if you get into it. But also, I've gotten into a few cartridges that have been a bit annoying or not as well built, but that can happen.
Did you ever start any that you just said, this cartridge is not for me, and gave up on it?
Yeah, we had one that we were traveling with another couple that we travel with, and we stopped to do this one. Was on a college campus, and we got out there in the middle of their campus thing and started doing that. And we was an hour and a half and still had not gotten what we felt like was even halfway through it and kept having to backtrack and so forth. And so we finally just says, we got to move on. It's just not working. It was interesting, but it was just confusing and we kept tripping over ourselves a little bit. And I've had a few others that I tried to do and was having trouble where my device was crashing. That's been several years ago that I finally give up on. But most of them nowadays, if I've decided to do it, we have had good luck with it. Part of it is I try to read the cache page enough and make sure that I understand what I'm getting myself in for and whether or not I think I have enough time to actually commit to it.
On the cache page, since it does have your typical cache page, the hint that's provided, is that typically for the actual physical location, physical container?
That again can run the gambit. It's nice if they were to put a hint for maybe the cartridge or hint for the find. I guess really I have not seen too many hints about what you're going to have to answer in the cartridge because usually that once you get into it, you're on the cartridge only.
Okay.
I guess there I would say the hint is probably more for the find more often.
And the size of the container can range anywhere, just like the traditional cache can.
Correct.
Okay. So container-wise, it's just like a traditional cache, but we find it a completely different way than just going to GC.
Correct. Yeah, I mean, you have to do through the cartridge to at least get the information. And I guess on occasion, the cartridge could literally take you to where when you're done, oh, I'm right at the cache. Some of them, it'll tell me, and then I may have to go somewhere else to find that final cache. I've had a few of them where I played the game, completed it, and then the final was a mile away from there.
Oh. So you may, depending on how far it is and how much time you may have to plan on coming back for the final a different time.
Yeah.
Okay. That's good to know. Do you have any final tips or advice about Wherigos to share with us?
The big thing is if you just kind of keep an open mind and try to have fun with it, and do realize that most of the time when you're playing a Wherigo cartridge, it is its own simulated world. The questions it asks may or may not relate to what you're physically doing. It's like I said, I use the example of this mall that I had them go around. When you played it, when you got to a certain point and it was going to ask you that, in the locations you would see, it would show me that there was another person in there that I went to. I didn't go to a physical person, so I may not actually have something physically there. It may all be contained with questions in the cartridge itself. So you just got to realize that it can be in a fantasy world. And if it is, it really can be kind of fun.
I may get hate for this, but when you say about it being in a fantasy world, I can't help but think about Pokemon Go. And I know so many people hate when you compare geocaching to Pokemon Go, but I think in some Wherigo instances, the virtual world at least it's kind of the similar idea. It's has nothing to do with your physical location.
Yes, exactly. The one other cartridge I wrote, it's called Save the Zoo at Mackin Park, I believe. But basically, in it, as you walked around the path that goes around the park, the cartridge pops up and says, oh, you now see a kangaroo or a camel or some animal. And you have to then interact. But there's nothing there. It's all just the cartridges says that it's there. So it's like in that way, the Pokemon, when you're actually trying to find the different Pokemon characters that are not physically there. But some cartridges, I actually have to go look at a house and count how many physical windows are there. So I actually have something. So it could be either way.
Do you have a favorite Wherigo that you have created?
I think this Mackin Park Save the Zoo is probably my most favorite because, like I say, is every player that plays it gets a different experience. It could take you a half an hour walking around the path. It could take you 2 hours if you happen to answer questions wrong, or just how the randomness of the cartridge is that it kind of there. And I had to laugh. I wrote that one for one of our picnics, and it was so funny to have groups of people walking around and look at each other going, I see this and I see that.
And that was due to a random number generator, right?
Uh-huh. I had random events happen. It would show you that an animal was there, or it would show you something else you needed for the animal or not. And I didn't even show you where the zones were. You just walked, and all of a sudden in the background, it showed that you were in a zone, or you walked into a zone, and then an event could happen. Maybe you would see something, maybe you wouldn't.
So you could literally play that one 10 times and have 10 different experiences.
Exactly.
That would be fun to just do and go play that one, I think, even after you find the cache. It sounds really interesting.
Something kind of different. And I guess I've got a second one like that, a maze one that you go through, and it's kind of has the maze changes as you walk through it. But it's not near as fun as that one that has just total randomness. And that's here in the Kansas City area.
That's awesome. I'm going to have to come out and try that one sometime if I have time and I'm in that area. I don't make it to that side of the border very often.
A little farther than we think across the state of Missouri.
It is. It is a bit of a trek. It is a bit of a trek, but I do have a couple caches that way on my geocaching bucket list that I hope to get to at some point. So I'll have to add that one to it. Well, Steve, thank you so much for coming on here today and helping us understand Wherigos. This has been very enlightening to me, for
Awesome.
sure.
Well, thank you for the invite and giving me the opportunity to talk about them and have fun, and also to remind myself of some of the stuff I did and where it goes over the years.
It's been a blast. Thank you.
Thank you. Have a great day.
You too. Thank you for listening to Geocache Adventures. I hope you enjoyed this episode. Have you heard of FTF Magazine? It's the magazine for geocachers, filled with articles and snippets sent in by geocachers just like you. I'm a subscriber myself, and I love it. Check them out today at ftfgeo.com and tell them Shadow Dragon 1 sent you. Would you like to be a guest on a show or have a topic you'd like to hear covered? Reach out and let me know. Just go to the geocacheadventures.org website and click on the contact page to reach out.